Thank you all, and thank you so much for staying till the end. I appreciate your being here, and I look forward to talking to you this afternoon. So I'm going to talk to you about informing policy decisions through data visualizations. And unfortunately, I was not able to attend yesterday, but from what I've learned today, I think some of the information that I'm going to present to you will be a little bit of a wrap-up of some of the themes that have been discussed. So let's see if I can. All right. So first of all, just some basic information. Data visualizations, they can do a lot of things for you. First of all, they can facilitate the understanding of complex information, and I think we've seen a lot of examples of how data visualizations can actually take a complex tables of numbers and make them look understandable. You can easily see patterns, etc. They allow for user interaction. I think some of the more sophisticated visualizations and some of the visualizations that I'm going to show to you today actually engage the user. So you're not just giving the information to someone and they're sitting there receiving it, but they're actually allowed to participate in this process of discovery with the data. And they also can, these last two bullets are really related. So the idea of supporting and informing policy decisions and evaluating the impact of policy decisions. Data visualizations provide context, can provide context to complex issues and problems. So for instance, I think we've seen, like in the presentation before, how you might present one piece of information, but it's a limited view of an entire situation. And I think you can present visualizations through benchmarking and other things that provide context. And I'm going to show you some examples of that today. So effective visualizations should support your efforts for transparency and accountability in education. And that's very important for all of us in higher ed and K through 12, is to be transparent and to be accountable to our audience. So, and the way they can do that is by telling a story, and this is something that I believe has been talked about here at this conference. You look for patterns in the data, and data combined with the right tools should lead to explanations and discovery. So you're really presenting a story about your institution through the data. Also, visualizations make information consumable. Data is just data. Numbers are just numbers. But through visualizations, you actually give something that the consumer can understand. It's like a vessel for transporting information to the consumer. And the right visualization is really key to making this happen. So what are some things that make for good visualizations? And what are some of the questions that you should ask yourself when picking the right visualization? So first of all, what's the data that you need to convey? What does the data look like? What's the structure of the data? And what message do you want to communicate? Data that's structured in particular ways lends itself to particular visualizations. And then you also have to think about, what are you trying to say with the data that you're presenting? And then, who's your audience? I think this was a question that our previous presenter was asking. Who is it that you're trying to present the data to? You need to know your audience, because the way you present data is going to be very different for very different audiences. And I'm going to show some examples of that as well. And then I think this is a really interesting question. Does your visualization offer a different way of thinking about the data? I mean, we're not just drawing pictures because they have nice colors and look pretty, but we're actually using the visualization to convey something, another deeper understanding of the message or the data that you're discussing. So a few things about using data visualization to inform policy. You can use trend analysis and predictive modeling, and I'm going to show you some examples of how you can do that to inform policy. You want to look at patterns over time and then think about, based on these patterns and characteristics, where are we going in the future through predictive modeling. You want to communicate the message to audiences of all levels. So you have an audience, but you may have many different levels of understanding within that audience. And one of the things that I think is really important is to be clear and to be simple. You know, flashy pictures and complex things are not always best when you're trying to convey important messages, particularly to busy people. And in higher ed, we're often conveying messages to, legislators, to executives, busy people. They want to look at something quick, they want to make a decision, and they want to move on. Another important thing about informing policy is, again, getting back to this idea of context, collaboration. Remember that there's other information outside of your own organization that you can add to your visuals and other types of data that you may not have even thought about before that can really enhance what you're doing. For instance, I'm going to show you how higher ed is making connections with the Workforce Commission. Two organizations that you may not, really only recently, have started working together. So think about who are your collaborators, what other types of information that may be outside of your field can really help you convey what's important to your audience. And then this idea of providing benchmarks for comparison or progress. So, as was mentioned, the University of Texas system is really large. We have 9 academic and 6 health institutions. We have a little over at the fall of 2013, a little over 200,000 students enrolled in our institutions combined. And last year we conferred over 50,000 degrees. So we educate quite a large number of students. And we've really been working to, in my office at the system level, to pull all this data together and bring meaning to policies that we make at the system level, and thinking about how we can most effectively serve our students and our constituents. So this is sort of this image is sort of the evolution of data use from our perspective and from our office. So we went from reporting. We have fact books. Any of you who are in a research office knows what a fact book is. Paper with tables. Sometimes when we started out with our fact books, we didn't even have pictures. And then we went to analyzing, asking why. And then now we're at planning, predicting, improving, and so asking what now. So there's this sort of arc of decision making. What happened? Why did it happen? And how are we going to go forward and improve? And there's a similar arc with sort of data delivery. So printed reports, we went to PDFs on the web, which is better. It's available on the internet, but it's still static, to interactive and online dashboard visualizations. I'm going to show some of those today. And these interactive visualizations, I think, are really where the future is in sort of presenting data in higher ed and in other industries, because it really does engage the user and allow them the opportunity to ask their own questions about the data, but not be experts in statistical or data analysis. So we at the University of Texas system acquired a bunch of different, as we went through this evolution of data analysis and data presentation, we acquired a bunch of new tools. And one of the things that we did was we developed a data warehouse. We acquired a visualization tool, which I'm going to show you, and an online dashboard as well. And so we have all these neat tools, and so the question is now, how do we use them effectively? And so one of the things we started to do was look at peer selection, benchmarking, and goal setting. So we looked at what are the institutions that are most similar to our institutions today, statistically similar. Those are the institutions' baseline peers. That gives us an idea of where we are now. We're like this group of institutions. That's how we know where we're starting. But the question is, where do we want to go? What are those institutions that we can look ahead and say, wow, in 10 to 15 years, I really want to be doing that? So we selected our peers that we wanted for our goal setting, our aspirational peers, and we use those to set goals. And benchmarking is really critical to evaluating performance because you need to know where you started and where you're going, and then along the way you need to track how far you're coming along and how well you're doing. And so because we have these interactive tools and the ability to get data, process it quickly, now we're able to do more sophisticated analyses looking at benchmarking and providing that important context. So just to give you a quick example, and this is a very simple graphic, and again, on the left-hand side, you'll see a basic bar chart. And this bar chart represents the cost what it costs our institutions to produce a degree. So each bar represents one of our institutions, and you're like, great, so you showed me what it costs to produce a degree. Well, that's not something that an administrator can necessarily use to make a decision about policy. But on the right-hand side, we added our peers. So then we said, how much did our peers spend to produce a degree? So now you have a comparison and something you can say, okay, compared to our peers, it cost us this much less or to produce a degree. And in this case, it was a happy story, but that's not always the case. But the point of this is that benchmarking provides a context that allows you to think about performance and to do analysis. Okay, so this is a picture of the UT System homepage, and this is a video. In this video, and I'm going to talk, and it's just there's no sound, but it's a video of our dashboard. And you can reach it from the UT System homepage. And here I'm choosing a report. And did I stop it? Okay. You'll notice that different reports are loading. Across the top there are tabs that look at different areas, from research to revenues to tuition and financial aid. This is opening up one of our tabs, looking at degrees, and here you have that peer comparison again. Orange is UT, and the line is the baseline, the median of the baseline peer. What's opening up now is a trend line. The orange line is UT, the blue line is the baseline peer, and the gray is the aspirational peer. So this is one of the tools we have. You can get to it from our UT system website, and I'll give you the URLs at the end if you're interested in looking at it more. But this is the type of work that we're doing with data visualization, and this is all free and open to the public. Okay, now this is a very, very simple visualization. And the point I want to make here is that you can represent a really complex idea very, very simply. So you can see, I want to walk over there, but I don't know if you hear me. So this is our total research expenditures and federal research expenditures for one institution. And then this is, the targets for that institution. It's a very simple presentation, but it's a very complex idea. We went through this statistical analysis to figure out what our appropriate targets should be. And now we're showing our progress to target here. So I guess my point is that when you're depending upon your audience, you can convey complex ideas very simply. And it's still a quite sophisticated analysis. So here is another short little video which is going to show you another example of our dashboard. And this one's going to emphasize that user interaction that I was talking about. So we have a part where you can build a graph. So on the left hand and on the right hand side, you can pick different things, and as those things are picked, you will see that the graphic is actually changing. So, and it's not so important really what it's showing for this particular presentation. I just wanted you to get the idea that the user can come here and they have this entire menu of a bunch of things that they can select from. and they can open it up, they can look at more or less, they can look at different things. So they're really involved in this process of analysis, and I think this is very powerful. All right. This is a tree map. Are many of you familiar with tree maps? This is, I think, a controversial visual, if you can say that. I really like these, and I like to ask people about them because you're like, whoa, what is that, all those squares? But I can give you a simple road map, and I think you'll see that this can be a really powerful visual, but this is definitely a more complex visual. So this particular picture shows time to degree for PhD programs. So each square represents like a major, and the biggest squares mean that we have the most students in that major. And the smaller squares means we have less, and the blue squares are students who are quickly moving through their degree program, whereas the brown to gold squares are those students who are not moving as quickly through the degree program. So with this, once you have that basic roadmap, you can immediately look and say, oh, what's this really brown square where students are taking a long time to get through the program? So, you can look at it quickly, you can get the big picture, but I'll show you, again, an animation. You can also hover over it to get the detail. So the mouse, and you can also choose which programs you want to look at. And when you hover, it tells you the number of students in that cohort, the time to degree. It gives you all the specific information that you may be looking for. So this is a little more of a complex visual. I think the pros are it shows you the big picture, and you can hover over and get the detail as well, and you can immediately see patterns that may be difficult to see if you're looking at a table of numbers. But the cons are that, this throws some people off. It's not on your XY axis. You have to kind of change your way of thinking. So, there are pros and cons to different types of visuals, and again, it just comes down to who's your audience. Okay, so I'm sure you're all familiar with KPIs, and the reason I put this slide up here was because, as you may or may not know, we have a public-facing dashboard that has 10 years of data on our UT system institutions. And we provide all kinds of data, trend data, current data. But what we don't have right now are KPIs, because KPI dials like this, and they go from red to green. You can see there's a specific value judgment, and these are often used for internal decision making within companies. So a lot of businesses have these to look at like their operational processes, but this may not be something that you necessarily want to present out of context on the web. And we are also one thing that's been really interesting about UT's transition to this sort of data driven culture is we're developing these sorts of dashboards for our operational units as system. So now we're looking at our shared services, and they're asking us, hey, would you develop a dashboard that would help us look and see how well we're doing on saving money through shared purchasing? And this is a video of an internal dashboard that we have is actually being used by our operational units within UT system. And as you can see, there are several different types of indicators here. Okay, so I know that several presentations throughout this two-day event have talked about predictive analytics. And this is something that we are doing that's new really to our office. But we're starting to think about what are the characteristics of students that may or may not indicate success. This particular graphic looks at the characteristics of students: first generation in college, gender, high school percentile, Pell, race, SAT. So we're interested in which of these factors, or which predicts success or may predict success from freshman to sophomore year. So the nice thing about this particular visualization is you don't really have to necessarily know very much about the mathematics behind it. So if you're trying to present this to administrators or other people who aren't necessarily statisticians, they can look and say, okay, well, you know, green means that those are indicators where the students are going to do characteristics associated with the students likely to move on to their sophomore year, whereas red to orange are characteristics where the students may not be likely or less likely to move on to sophomore year. And this helps you target your interventions to students. Okay, so students who are Pell recipients, we know that there's going to be some problems right off the bat, and we need to provide services to help them when they come into the university to make sure that they move on to their sophomore year. So this is one example of the way you could show sort of a more complex statistical process, but make it easily understood. This is, the reason that this is up here is this is Campus 1, Campus 2, Campus 3. If you look at this, as a user, as a reader, what you automatically want to do is start comparing Campus 1, Campus 2, Campus 3. And I put this up here more as a cautionary tale. So it's not just about the individual graphic that you put on the page, but it's sort of about how you present numerous graphics. So if you're writing a report or you're preparing a dashboard, don't put things next to each other where you don't want the reader to go right and compare right across, because that's what you're automatically going to do. And in this situation, that would not necessarily be appropriate. Okay. I'm going to go over here. I'll try to talk loud. So this is a decision tree, and this is super cool. And the reason it is because, and I know it just looks crazy, there's stuff everywhere. But again, going back to those characteristics of students that may help or inhibit success in transitioning from the freshman to the sophomore year. You start up at the very top, you throw all these in a model, and what you come out with is at the very top whether or not the student is first generation in college. So what is the effect of that on whether or not they're going to move on to their sophomore year? We know of all of these things, gender, SAT score, high school percentile, that whether they're first generation or not is going to be the biggest predictor of whether or not they're going to move from freshman to sophomore year. And the cool thing about this decision tree is it takes the population of students that you're looking at, and I can say, okay, I have 1,838 students in this population that are first generation students. So now, as an administrator, I know I need to target these students for my intervention. And so, rather than me just presenting some regression coefficient and saying, well, controlling for gender, race, high school percentile, first generation is your biggest predictor, and give you, it's the coefficient is X, I've laid it all out for you where you can look at it and actually identify the population. So it's a really cool way to talk to people who are in the field that actually need to implement interventions in higher ed. Okay. So recently, the UT system developed a tool for students and parents. And this was really the first time anyone in my office had ever done anything for students and parents. So I guess some things to think about when you do that, and some things that we did, and then I'm going to show you the tool, is really you want to involve your audience in your decision making. So we had this idea that we wanted to build a tool so that students could know what their salary would be by major first year after college, fifth year after college, and then what their student debt would be. And so we went to our student advisory council and we talked to him about the idea and we got some feedback, and then we went back to our office and we mocked up what we thought this tool would look like. And we brought it back to the students. And so the students, well, when I show you the tool, I'm going to tell you some of the stories about what some of the students said. But a general overview of the tool is it provides for student, right now we have 5 years of students in the data. It looks at actual earnings of students that have graduated from UT system working within the state of Texas, 1 year and 5 years out of college, their student debt by major. We also show the distribution of earnings. So we don't just show first year out the median earnings are X, we do show that, but we also show, like to give the students a larger perspective. So, you know, you might start, there's a whole range of salaries you might make your first year. There's a low end, there's a high end, and there's a middle. And that was important to students. They wanted to understand that it wasn't just one number. And then we also added data based on their feedback on opportunities within the labor market for when they graduate for certain occupations that they were interested in. So I'm going to transition quickly and just give you a look at this tool, because it's a little bit of a different way of presenting data. This is our visual analytics tool, and you can look at this on your computer, but you can also look at it on the iPad, and I love that it's portable because everyone really seems to have a portable device these days, and our administrators really wanted something that was portable. So the tool is called CQT. So I'm just going to jump right in and walk you through it, and it's a series of questions. So the student might ask, how much did UT students graduating with a bachelor's degree earn in Texas, and how much did they owe in student loans? We tried to put simple questions at the top to help guide the students. So then they would say, I'm interested in, and they're going to select a program. Let's select architecture. It's the first one. And then I'm going to say, I'm going to attend UT Austin, so I've selected that. And notice as I make selections, the graphs on the right change. So here, let me open this up for you. And now you can see first year median earnings right out of school around $39,000, fifth year $49,000, and average student debt $24,000. And this is student debt of those students who have taken out loans. So we've only looked at the population of students who've taken out loans. These are full-time earnings. So then the student might ask the question, how much did the earnings of UT graduates in Texas vary within a major? So let's pick a different program, biological and biomedical sciences, and we'll pick our comprehensive schools, UT Brownsville, Pan American, Permian Basin. And this is what I was talking about as far as providing a range. So at the low end of the scale, the students first year out of college made $22,000, but at the high end they made $51,000. And when we showed this to the students, they wanted 10%, 50%, and 90% because they wanted to know what is the lowest end and what is the highest end. They were interested in the extremes of the earnings. We had a more gradual scale. And then the same thing, same field. This is biology and biological sciences, fifth year earnings. So they get an idea of a comparison between first and fifth year and also the range within that. Okay, now this is when I was mentioning that I would talk about what some of the students said. So we created this chart, and I looked at this and I was like, no way, this is way too complicated. We cannot show this to the students. And this is why that student input was important, because, you know, that's my perspective. Well, we brought this to the students. It was like their favorite thing. They loved it. They immediately understood it. So, you know, that's just a story, and, you know, always good to check with your audience. So what you can do is you can select different fields, and I'm going to put engineering on here because that's an extreme. And as you can see, let me make it bigger. So These are first year and fifth year earnings, the median. And then you can start exploring. So if everyone's like, well, what's the dot at the top? That's business and communications. In petroleum engineering, everyone says I should have been an engineer. But of course, you'd have to be able to do the math to be an engineer. So about $100,000 first year out. And then on the lower end, we have linguistics, $32,000 first year out, $38,000 fifth year out. And people were concerned, what about the liberal arts? And I think we see with this tool that the people in the liberal arts are actually doing better than you may have thought, and there's a growth. So they see that, yes, they may start out lower, but their growth pattern is much steeper than a lot of other majors that start out high and stay steady. So I think there's really a lot of opportunities. This is just a table, but we wanted to give the students the idea of, first of all, how long does it take to earn a degree? So now I've looked at the salaries and I have stars in my eyes. I want to be an engineer. Well, how long is it going to take me to get that degree? And what percentage of students continue on to graduate school after they graduate? So we matched our data with the National Student Clearinghouse because, as an undergraduate, you want to know when you're signing up for your first course in your freshman year whether or not you're going to have to go into graduate school. Are you prepared? Are you interested in going to graduate school? Are you prepared to take on that financial responsibility of going to graduate school? And so we really wanted students to be armed with this information before they started. So again, you can pick different things, and you can see how this is an interactive chart. You're picking a school, you're picking different areas, and as I pick it, the table's changing. And I think engaging the user is really important. And by the way, this is a public tool. It's on our website. Anyone can go look at it. And then the other input that the students gave us was about jobs in Texas. So we had really just developed a tool that looked at earnings and student debt, and they were like, well, we want to know about what jobs are going to be available. So we went back and we went to the Bureau of Labor Statistics and pulled this data. And here we're able to say which jobs will have the most growth and what do people working in Texas in those jobs earn. And so let's say we pick computer and mathematical operations, and let's just say I'm going to pick computer specialist. And then I can open this chart. And here's computer programmers. So the national job growth is 12%, and the Texas job growth is 10.7%. Now, this is projected for 2020 from the Bureau of Labor Statistics, so this would be important for students who are going to be graduating. And then in this chart, we have the median salary. So software developers, the national median's $87,000, the Texas median's $91,000. One of the things that I learned in looking at this Bureau of Labor Statistics data closely, as I was saying, education and workforce, I think this is a new horizon that we are looking at, is that there are a lot of jobs in Texas. Texas is a booming economy, and we are very lucky. Whoops. Okay, so the other thing the students wanted to see that we got from the student feedback was, I want to know about regions of Texas. A lot of students that we know from our own research here at Systems stay in Texas after they graduate. So, I'm interested in the Austin area. I'm interested in, let's do something like art and design. And then, okay, so I picked Austin, I picked art and design, and I picked media and communication equipment workers. And then we're going to now look at the job growth. And here we go. Audio and video equipment is projected to be a 20% job growth in the Austin area by 2020. And the 2022 data are out with the VLS, and we'll be updating that shortly. Now, the other thing, though, that's really important is this table below. So what does that mean, 20% growth? Well, that means 10 jobs is what's projected. So we have both perspectives, the percentile growth, but right under it, we want them to know that that's 10 jobs. And then one of the issues that we've had in matching our student educational records with employment data is we can't match it with data that's outside of Texas because that's not available now at the individual level. So we provided this information from the Bureau of Labor Statistics about what people earn in other states to provide some context. So, if people are interested in moving, it's not necessarily our actual graduates, but, let's just say you're interested in moving to California and you want to work in business operations. Let's look at claims adjusters. The national median is $58,000 and the California median is $64,000. So we created this tool really to give students and parents a better idea of more information to help make informed decisions when they were entering into their higher ed process. And like I said, this is on our website. It's free and open to the public, and we hope to update it with 10 years of data that we're getting now so we can start looking at graduate degrees. But a couple of points. One is if you're working with a new audience, take time to talk to them. Figure out, get their reaction, involve them in the process, particularly when you're creating visuals. Again, you can make things look cool, but they still are pretty simple. I mean, I'm showing you bar charts with lines, but I think it looks, pretty neat and high tech. So, you don't have to put this just giant mass of dots everywhere in order for someone to really, think that you've done a nice job. And you can convey complex ideas very simply. And I think that's particularly important if you're talking to people, busy people who need to look at something, get a message, and then move on. So a few lessons that we've learned from UT system. Data is just data. As I've said, it's research and analysis that you do behind the scenes that transforms that data and makes meaning of it. Visualization and presentation make that information consumable. And I think that the presenter before us talked a lot about this idea of data marketing and to be careful. Data should tell a story, but it should tell an accurate story, one that really reflects what's actually happening. And you, as the expert, know the context of the data that you're presenting, and you want to make sure that you present it in the right context because not all consumers are data savvy. And I know we've also talked a lot about cleaning data, storing data, using good practices. You can never do enough of making sure that your data are accurate and consistent, particularly when you're presenting them to people who are going to be using that data to make decisions. So we started small. We started with like 10 indicators on our BI dashboard, but we had some quick successes and we gained a lot of momentum very quickly, and now we have people coming to us saying, hey, can you create a dashboard for our department so we can help manage our operations and we don't have to do all these paper reports. Change is hard for everyone. Expect resistance, but keep at it because this is really where higher ed is going, and the more that people in this room get out and talk about the cool things that are going on in higher ed and the different ways that we can look at the world, I think the more that we will move the field forward. And I'll end with our all of our links. If you want to look at our productivity dashboard, our data visualizations, we have a Twitter feed. I don't do that, but we have one. And a website as well. And all of this can be reached from our utsystem.edu.